And we begin tonight with a continuing tragedy in Hawaii. The death toll from wildfires there has risen to 55, but hundreds more are still missing on the island of Maui. It is feared that the number of dead could rise significantly. Governor Josh Green has called the fires catastrophic and the largest in the state's history. And President Biden proclaimed the fires a major disaster, freeing up federal funding for rescue and recovery efforts. Meanwhile, firefighters continue to battle the flames, and the BBC has been speaking to survivors, sharing dramatic stories of escape and destruction. You can, of course, follow our live page for some of those stories, these images as well, latest developments. We are expecting a press conference in this hour from authorities. We'll bring that to you as soon as it starts. Joining me now is Mojtaba Sadegh, Associate Professor of Civil Engineering at Boise State University, and Ives Garcia, Associate Professor of Landscape Architecture and Urban Planning at Texas A&M University. Great to have you both on the program. And Ives, I want to start with you because you look at disaster recovery and relief. And President Biden, as we said, made this major disaster declaration. You have FEMA on the ground as well, but Maui is a remote island. How does that complicate efforts to help?
Thank you so much for having me. I have been watching just a devastation and can definitely relate, being originally from Puerto Rico and the devastation that we have after Hurricane Maria. An island complicates things quite a bit. First of all, the transportation, if it were in the mainland, it might be by trucks and trains, and here it has to be by boats, helicopters and airplanes, and that adds to the difficulty. Also, to be able to deploy a staff is going to be a lot more costly and take more time. So in terms of just transportation, that's going to be the first thing that is just going to delay the aid.
You're going to see limited aid on the ground in Maui for the time being.
Yes, that's what we can expect. And that might be just for some days and weeks. But just think about the recovery process. So we are adding all the materials that have to be shipped in order to be able to fix the homes, and the shortage of labor to be able to get people that can work on the ground at prices that also the federal government will cover if people are receiving aid, or it will be a lot more costly if people are using the private market, because there's going to be a lot of shortage of materials as well.
Mojtaba, I want to bring you in now because you and your team have been looking at wildfires across the country. What left Hawaii, Maui here specifically, so exposed?
Influence of factors that created this disaster, right? So we have the high winds. Always high winds are really disastrous when it comes to fires. But in this specific case, we also have a lot of vegetation. This is a grass fire, so we had a lot of grass on the ground, and grass fires spread really quickly. And as the fire is transported into the city and buildings start to burn, then it becomes really difficult to control those fires. The buildings are built of burnable materials here in the U.S. and it just blows off.
I found really interesting in your research that the number of people directly exposed to wildfires more than doubled from 2000 to 2019, and that will mean that people are increasingly exposed in areas that just aren't used to wildfires, according to your research, of course. How will they have to adapt?
Well, there are good programs out there. One of them is being Firewise, which is basically training people what to do with their houses, how to remove vegetation around the house, how to harden their homes. All those are things that are available at the individual level. At the community level, reducing vegetation at the community level and make sure that there is not enough burnable material, being grasses that are growing around communities, being the forest that is there. It's just necessary to be done. But also, talking about this becoming a disaster, there are needs for resources, being that in this specific case, cell phone coverage was cut. thinking about the infrastructure that's needed to give information and to help sort occur are necessary.
That's a really interesting point. Sorry to cut you off. We just had lost your sound there for just a moment, but we can hear you well again. Ivis, coming to you, given the limitations that you mentioned that are presented in a situation like Maui, what do you think relief and recovery efforts are going to look like now?
So again, it's going to be slow at the beginning, and usually what happens is that the community has to mobilize. So we are talking about neighbors, associations, and nonprofit organizations that are on the ground. So they are very likely to be engaged and people to receive aid through these organizations. So it's like very important that people support these organizations outside of government, because government might take a little bit more time to deploy and make decisions. So that's like something that I really encourage people to be thinking about supporting nonprofit organizations on the ground.
Yeah, they certainly are doing a lot of work, Ivis, on the ground right now in Maui, as we know. Mojtaba, coming back to you, just listening to what you were saying about your research and the increase of wildfires, does this mean that every state essentially is going to have to start to make plans to adapt to the possibility of wildfires?
That is absolutely true. We should not wait for the disaster. This Maui island, but what?
Okay. Unfortunately, Mojtaba, it looks like we're still having some trouble with your line there. So we've been able to hear a bit of your answer, but not all of it. So we'll leave it there. But I want to thank you both very much for sharing your perspectives with us tonight, Mojtaba and Ivis. Great to have you on the program.